internationally known megastar of sewing-related internet videos, I get asked a lot of questions. And one of the most common questions I get is, where can I get materials to make a backpack or another heavy-duty project without spending a lot of money, because I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want to waste money buying material just to try to learn. My answer has often been that you can find material to learn on and go through a learning process by going to a thrift store, buying an existing item, taking it apart with a seam ripper, and using the materials you get to make your project. On a recent thrift store trip, I found this hanging garment bag. And it's a pretty good quality one. I think it's a Victorinox or one of the Swiss Army brands. Good material to make a everyday carry backpack or a small duffel bag or some other kind of sewing project out of. There's also a good bit of zipper and some other miscellaneous buckles and a little bit of webbing. So in this video, I'm going to take this bag apart, see what materials I end up with, and make a project only from the materials that I got from this garment bag. You could take your favorite pair of scissors and just cut big pieces out of this bag, but there's two reasons why I suggest that's not what you should do. One, you're going to waste more material by using scissors rather than seam ripping it and taking it apart at the actual seam. But the main reason is, if you're a beginner, taking something like this apart is a great way to see how it was put together. If you like the look of a particular finished seam, by taking it apart, you can get some insight into how it was put together in the first place, so you can then duplicate that in your own project. If you're just starting out and you're not familiar with a seam ripper, they look like this. Your sewing machine may have come with one. They're very common. These particular ones you can buy online. They're very inexpensive. You use the pointy part of the seam ripper to get underneath the stitches, and then there's a cutting blade in the middle that actually cuts the thread. And then I'll show you what this red ball is for in a second. So I found where the binding ends meet on this bag, and I'm going to start there so I can remove the binding. And you just want to get the tip underneath the stitching, and you can just cut through to begin with. Where the ball comes in handy is to keep you from cutting through your material. You can put the end with the ball underneath and just start cutting through the stitches. And that makes this go much, much faster. Depending on the material you're working with, you do have to be careful with the pointy end, because you could cut into the fabric that you're trying to save, so take your time. As long as you're not in a hurry, seam ripping can be quite relaxing. If you have a helper, it can take a long time. So I've finished seam ripping the bag into its various pieces, and to be honest with you, just to save some time, I did eventually just use scissors to cut out pieces I knew I wanted and not bother saving things that I knew I didn't need. I do want to mention one thing about the seam ripper. This is a sharpened piece of steel. It's basically a little tiny knife, and when seam ripping, there are times when you're going to be forcing it with, depending on what you're seam ripping, maybe quite a bit of effort. And if it's pointing towards your hand and finally breaks loose, you're going to stab yourself in the hand or maybe through the hand with this thing. So make sure you use caution for yourself and also for anybody who happens to be around you while you're doing it. It's easy to take this for granted. So let's see what I ended up with. From the exterior, I really didn't get as much yield of material out of this as I might have hoped for the size of the bag that I started with. But I have one square piece here, and then the foam that was behind that, and I think I can use this as padding for a back panel. I'm not even yet sure what I'm going to make here, but if it's going to be a backpack, then I can use this as padding for the back panel and maybe for straps if I make straps. This thin piece here actually would be a perfect start for a strap. It's already attached to the foam. I haven't separated it. If I had two of these, that would be great, but I only have the one. But maybe I'll duplicate it and use this to make a strap or something. We'll see. This part was already made with this rubber material. sewn in as a detail. And rather than seam rip it out and just try to use the fabric, I thought I might as well just go ahead and leave it like it is and sew it into my project as is. We'll see how it looks. There was a piece of mesh that made a mesh pocket on the interior. I'll probably make use of this. There's quite a bit of interior lining fabric. There's more here that I'm going to use for this project. This would be a good thing to hang on to make other liners or other little projects out of, or just for practice. There were several pieces of this plastic stiffening material, and again, I'm not sure if I'm going to use that in this project or not, but it's the kind of thing that I'll stick in my stash box and may find a use for in some future project. And then in this bag I have various webbing, the plastic D-rings and buckles. I think there was one side release buckle and the zippers that came out of the bag. Again, there's more here than I'm going to need for what I'm going to make, but this can all be used for future projects. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to make. Is there any chance I could get you to move? So after looking at the pieces that I have available and thinking about what I can make and what I might use, I've finally decided on a direction. I'm going for something between a messenger bag and a haversack, but for more urban use. Alright, fuck it, it's a purse. But, I think this could be a useful bag to carry everyday carry items that I normally carry with me to work. My everyday carry backpack is about ready to be retired and I need to make a new one for myself. This might be a good stopgap in the meantime and maybe something that I could use occasionally. This would be good for like your personal item on a flight where you have a carry-on and a personal item, perhaps, probably a little laptop, that kind of thing. So I've got it clipped together with binder clips just to kind of see how the size feels, and I've got to make a liner for it and a bunch of other stuff, but it's late February, it's 85 degrees outside, the sun is shining, the tide is high. I think it's time to take a break. So I've unclipped all the pieces now, and I'm going to make a liner for the bag. I'm going to make a floating, or maybe semi-floating liner, which is something I haven't done before, but my plan is to do this in a way that doesn't require any binding. So I've got my lining material laid out, and what I want to try to do is cut out pieces that don't have a lot of stitch holes in them, just to try to make it look as clean as possible. I'm going to use this mesh that was just a mesh pocket in the garment bag to make, well, another mesh pocket in this bag. I've decided to keep this bag really simple, partly for time and partly because I don't think I'm going to actually use this bag for a really long time. It might form the basis of another bag that I'll make, and I'll add details to that one. But for the purposes of this bag, I'm just going to keep it simple. So I'm going to use this mesh to just make one divided area, one slip pocket for any items that I want to keep separated, and the rest of it's just going to be an open storage compartment. One more piece I want to cut out here is I'm going to make a stiffener out of the plastic stiffener that they use in the garment bag to support the top flap. Since I'm only going to have a single side release buckle to close the flap, I'm hoping that using this plastic stiffener will help make the flap be closed a little bit more securely than if it was just loose material. I haven't actually tried this before, so we'll see how it works. If you're trying to make something like this and the thing you bought at the thrift store doesn't have the stiffening plastic, if you want a cheap option, you can buy some plastic folders from the grocery store or an office supply store and cut those up. And I've heard that people have had success with that. I haven't tried it, but just any thin plastic like this would probably work fine. So in keeping with the thrift store challenge theme, I've decided to use what I'm going to carefully refer to as my least capable sewing machine. This is my Singer 348. This machine was actually given to me, and I have a video about it. You can check out the card. You could expect to purchase a machine similar to this one for under $50 and maybe $20-ish at any thrift store. This kind of machine is, commonly available, and its capabilities are what you could expect from any vintage sewing machine. I don't think it would be a fair comparison to use one of my Singer 201s or the Sailrite or something that most people may not have access to. So this is your average, everyday vintage sewing machine. The needle I'm going to be using in the machine is a size 90 domestic sewing needle, and I'm going to be using V69 bonded nylon thread. V69 is generally considered the thickest or heavy-dutiest thread to be used in a typical domestic sewing machine. And I happen to have a lot of it, so that's why I'm going to use it. You could certainly use a standard sewing thread that you buy at a fabric store. I wouldn't recommend that you use any thread that comes with an old sewing machine that you've bought at a thrift store or a garage sale, unless you're really certain it's new thread. Thread tends to deteriorate over time, and you don't want to spend a lot of time sewing together a project and then have it fail because the thread was old or your cat chewed it. A quick note on the needle-thread fabric relationship. Generally you want to use a thread that's appropriate for the fabric that you're using, and the needle needs to fit the thread that you're using. There are a lot of variables, but in general, you want to use the appropriate size thread for the fabric and the appropriate size needle for the thread. I know that V69 works well for the kind of material that I'm using because I use it all the time for similar materials. So to make sure that this needle is going to fit, first I'm going to thread the needle. And now with the needle threaded, if I hold the thread taut and at an angle, the needle should easily move down the thread. There's more to this than I'm explaining right now, but this will get you far enough. This was supposed to go in there. So I've sewn together the liner of the bag. If I turn it out, which is actually not how it's going to be in the bag, you can see the mesh pocket that'll be on the front side of the bag. But it'll actually sit in the bag, just like this. So I mentioned for the liner I'm going to do a semi-floating liner. I don't even know if that's what it's actually called, but that's what I'm calling it. So to give you an example, this insulated lunchbox cooler thing has a floating liner that's only attached around the opening, and you can pull it out like this. That's not what I want. So what I'm going to do is just sew the seam allowances on the bottom of the liner to the seam allowances on the bottom of the bag, and that way the liner will be floating inside, but you won't be able to just yank it out. That way when I'm pulling items out of the bag, I won't pull the whole liner out, which doesn't look that good and could cause it to get damaged on something. So here's the finished bag. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I didn't show this in the construction portion of the video, but to finish attaching the liner to the exterior of the bag, I just folded the liner and folded the exterior of the bag, and then put those folded edges together and sewed it. And that way I didn't have to do any binding at all. One other thing I want to point out about the construction of this bag, I can't swear to it 100%, but I'm 99% positive I didn't take a single measurement throughout this entire process. I started with the front panel, the one that had the rubber piece in it, and then I just eyeballed all the other pieces to make them fit. To make the liner, I just took the individual pieces of the exterior, laid those on the lining fabric, traced around them, and cut them out, and it all came out pretty good. So, if you're doing a project like this, especially if you're just starting out, this is, obviously very inexpensive material. If you mess it up, it's not the end of the world, and you learn a lot from mistakes. The point is, don't get stuck on the details of how many centimeters does this piece need to be in order to have a bag of this many liters. Just make something and see what you like and fix the things you don't. So I've carried this bag for about a week now. I carry a bag with me every day when I go to work to carry my water bottle and a few other essential items and just some things I like to have on me just in case. I did install the little snap hook key lanyard that was in the original garment bag, and I've just got a spork and a little multi-tool hanging from it. So I sewed the plastic stiffening material into the flap of the bag, and I attached the side release buckle directly to where that stiffener is. And I do like that so far, and I might repeat that again in a future project. It just gives a little bit more substance to the flap. I also installed the existing handle that was on the garment bag, and honestly, I kind of did it backwards, the way this handle is folded. I think it would look better if that side were the front, so the fold was on the back side. But again, this is a prototype rough draft, so I'm not going to take it out and redo it. I just used the existing strap that came with the garment bag. There's no need to make another strap just like it. And it has this kind of shoulder, not really even a pad. I mean, I guess it's padded a little bit, but it's just a wider area. Probably I wouldn't bother making something like this if I were going to make my own. And then inside the bag, again, I just kept it very simple. There's the mesh divider that honestly doesn't work very well. Really, if I was going to make this permanent bag, I would want something a little bit stiffer than the mesh. I think when I make a permanent version of the bag, I'm going to make a organizer panel for pens and notebooks and things like I usually do in a messenger bag. So there you have it. For $3.99, plus whatever thread went into the bag, plus a few hours of my time, I have a useful bag that actually looks quite good. As a matter of fact, one of my coworkers, when they saw it, asked me where I bought it, which is about as high of a compliment as you can ask for when you're making stuff. I also wanted to mention, I used the Singer 348 because it's an inexpensive machine that you could find a machine similar to this with similar capabilities for very little money at your garage sale, thrift store, and your mom's attic. You may already have one. And I didn't want anyone watching this video to think, well, boy, I could go make something like he made, but I don't have a $600, walking foot sewing machine or whatever. And I did that thinking that I was going to be struggling and compromising. I use industrial machines at work day in and day out, and I have some very capable machines here. This thing is great. I really like this machine now. It struggled some, and quite honestly, it struggled mostly because the belt's loose and I need to tighten it more. But man, it was really a joy to use. So don't feel like if you don't have the money for a highly capable machine and you have to make do with a vintage domestic machine, that it's going to be a hardship. As long as you're keeping realistic expectations of what you can sew through and you're not trying to make boots or horse saddles or something, these old machines can do quite a bit. I hope you found this video useful. If you liked it, click on the thumbs up button. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.